Hi there, welcome back, or welcome for the very first time. You're safe now. This is your time to rest. Let go of your day. Let your breath slow down and your thoughts float gently away. Tonight I'll be reading you a fairy tale, an old story wrapped in moonlight and carried on a quiet breeze just for you. So snuggle in, get cozy, and let the soft rhythm of the story guide you into dreams. Let's begin. Story 19. Powell, Prince of Dyfed. One of the oldest Welsh fairy tales tells us about Powell, king of fairyland, and the father of the numerous clan of the Powells. He was a mighty hunter. He could ride a horse, draw a bow, and speak the truth. He was always honoured by the men and kept his faith and his promises to women. The children loved him, for he loved them. In the castle hall, he could tell the best stories. No man, bard or warrior, footholder or commoner could excel him in gaining and keeping the attention of his hearers, even when they were sleepy and wanted to go to bed. One day, when out hunting in the woods, he noticed a pack of hounds running down a stag. He saw at once that they were not his own, for they were snow white in colour and had red ears. Being a young man, Powell did not know at this time of his life that red is the fairy colour, and that these were all dogs from fairyland. So he drove off the red-eared hounds and was about to let loose his own pack on the stag when a horseman appeared on the scene. The stranger at once began to upbraid Powell for being impolite. He asked why his hounds should not be allowed to hunt the deer. Powell spoke pleasantly in reply, making his proper excuses to the horseman, and the two began to like each other and soon got acquainted and mutually enjoyed being companions. It turned out that the stranger was Aaron, a king in fairyland, and he had a rival named Hagen who kept beating him and his army at war. So Aaron asked Powell to help him against his enemy. He even made request that 1 year from the time Powell should meet Hagen in battle, and told him that one stroke of his sword would finish the enemy. He then must sheathe his weapon and not, on any account, strike a second time. To make victory sure, the fairy king would exchange shapes with the mortal ruler, and each take not only the place, but the shape and form of the other. Powell must go into fairyland and govern the kingdom there, while Aaron would take charge of the affairs at Dyfed. But Powell was warned again to smite down his enemy with a single stroke from his sword. If, in the heat of the conflict and the joy of the victory, Powell should forget and give a second blow to Hagen, he would immediately come to life and be as strong as ever. Powell heeded well these words. Then, putting on the shape of Aaron, he went into fairyland, and no one noticed or thought anything different from the days and years gone by. But now, at night, a new and unexpected difficulty arose. Aaron's beautiful wife was evidently not in on the secret, for she greeted Powell as her own husband. After dinner, when the telling of stories in the banqueting hall was over, the time had come for them to retire. But the new bedfellow did not even kiss her or say good night, but turned his back to her and his face to the wall, and never moved again until daylight. Then the new king in Fairyland rose up, ate his breakfast, and went out to hunt. Every day he ruled the castle and kingdom as if he had always been the monarch. To everybody he seemed as if he had been long used to public business, and no questions were asked, nor was there any talk made on the subject. Everyone took things as a matter of course. However polite or gracious he might be to the Queen during the day, in the evening he spoke not a word, and passed every night as at the first. The 12 months soon sped along, and now the time for the battle in single combat between Powell and Hagen had fully come. The two warriors met in the middle of a river ford, and backed their horses for a charge. Then they rushed furiously at the other. Powell's spear struck Hagen so hard that he was knocked out of the saddle and hurled the length of a lance over and beyond the crupper or tail strap of his horse. He fell mortally wounded upon the ground. Now came the moment of danger and temptation to Powell, for Hagen cried out, "For the love of heaven, finish your work on me, slay me with your sword." But Powell was a wise man, and his head was cool. He had kept in mind the warning to strike only one blow. He called out loudly so that all could hear him, "I will not repeat that. Slay thee who may, I shall not." So Hagen, knowing his end had come, bade his nobles bear him away from the river shore. Then Powell, with his armies, overran the 2 kingdoms of Fairyland, and made himself master of all. He took oath of all the princes and nobles who swore to be loyal to their new master. This done, Powell rode away to the trysting place in the glen, and there he met Aaron, as had been appointed. They changed shapes, and each became himself as before. Aaron thanked Powell heartily, and bade him see what he had done for him. Then each one rode back in his former likeness to his kingdom. Now at Anwin, no one but Aaron himself knew that anything unusual had taken place. After dinner and the evening storytelling were over, and it was time to go to bed, Aaron's wife was surprised in double measure. 2 things puzzled her. Her husband was now very tender to her, and also very talkative, whereas for a whole year, every night, he had been as silent and immovable as a log. How could it be in either case? But this time the wife was silent as a statue. Even though Aaron spoke to her 3 times, he received no reply. Then he asked directly of her, why was she so silent? She made an answer that, for a whole year, no word had been spoken in their bedroom. "What?" said he. Did we not talk together, as always before?" "No," said she, "not for a year has there been talk or caress between us." At this answer, Aaron was overcome with surprise and struck with admiration at having so good a friend. He burst out first in praise of Powell, and then told his wife all that had happened during the past 12 months. She, too, was full of admiration and told her husband that in Powell he had certainly found a true friend. In Dyfed, when Powell had returned to his own land and castle, he called his lords together, and he asked them to be perfectly frank and free to speak. They must tell him whether they thought him a good king during the year past. All shouted in chorus of approval, and their spokesman addressed Powell thus: "My lord, never was thy wisdom so great, thy generosity more free, nor thy justice more manifest than during the past year." When he had ceased, all the vassals showed their approval of this speech. Then Powell, smiling, told the story of his adventures in exchanging his form and tasks, at the end of which the spokesman, taking his cue from the happy faces of all his fellow vassals, made reply: "Of a truth, Lord, we pray thee, do thou give thanks to heaven that thou hast formed such a fellowship. Please continue to us the form of the kingdom and rule that we have enjoyed for a year past." Thereupon King Powell took oath, kissing the hilt of his sword, and called on heaven to witness his promise that he would do as they had desired. So the two kings confirmed the friendship they had made. Each sent the other rich gifts of jewels, horses, and hounds. In memory of so wonderful and happy union of a mortal and fairy, Powell thereafter, in addition to all his titles, was saluted as Lord of Anwen, which is only another name for the land of the fairies. The end. Powell and his bride. Not far from the castle where King Powell had his court, there was a hillock called the Mount of Macbeth. It was the common belief that some strange adventure would befall anyone who should sit upon that mount. He would receive blows or wounds, or else he would see something wonderful. Thus it came to pass that none but peaceful bards had ever sat upon the mount. Never a warrior or a common man had risked sitting there. The general fear felt and the awe inspired by the place was just too great. But after his adventure of being king of Fairyland for a whole year, everything else to Powell seemed dull and commonplace. So, to test his own courage and worthiness of kingship, Powell assembled all his lords at Narberth. After the night's feasting, revelry, and storytelling, Powell declared that next day he would sit upon the enchanted mound. So when the sun had fully risen, Powell took his seat upon the mound, expecting that, all of a sudden, something unusual would happen. For some minutes, nothing, whether event or vision, took place. Then he lifted up his eyes and saw approaching him a white horse on which rode a lady. She was dressed in shining garments as if made of gold. Evidently she was a princess, yet she came not very near. "Does anyone among you know who this lady is?" Powell asked of his chieftains. "Not one of us," was the answer. Thereupon Powell ordered his vassals to ride forth. They were to greet her courteously and inquire who she was. But now the predicted wonder took place. She moved away from them, yet at a quiet pace that suited her, though the knights spurred their horses and rode fast and furiously. They could not come any nearer to her. They galloped back and reported their failure to reach the lady. Then Powell picked out others and sent them riding after the lady, but each time one and all returned, chagrined with failure. A woman had beaten them. So the day closed with silence in the castle hall. There was no merrymaking or storytelling that night. The next day, Powell sat again on the mound, and once more the golden lady came near. This time, Powell himself left his seat on the mound, leapt on his fleetest horse, and pursued the maiden, robed in gold, on the white horse. But she flitted away, as she had done before from the knights. Again and again, though he could get nearer and nearer to her, he failed. Then the baffled king cried out in despair, "O maiden fair, for the sake of him whom thou lovest, stay for me." Evidently the lady, who lived in the time of castles and courts, did not care to be wooed in the style of the cavemen. Such manners did not suit her, but with a change of method of speaking words of love, her heart melted. Besides, she was a kind woman. She took pity on the horses as well as the men. Sweet was her voice as she answered most graciously, "I will stay gladly, and it were better for thy horses hadst thou asked me properly long ago." To his questions as to how and why she came to him, she told her story as follows. "I am Rhiannon, descended from the august and venerable one of old. My aunts and uncles tried to make me marry against my will a chieftain named Gwal, an auburn-haired youth, son of Clyd. But because my love to thee, I would have no husband, and if you reject me, I will never marry any man. As heaven is my witness, were I to choose among all the damsels and ladies of the world, thee I would choose," cried Powell. After that, it was agreed that when a year had sped, Powell should go to the palace of the august and venerable one of old and claim her for his bride. So, when 12 months had passed, Powell, with his retinue of 100 knights, all splendidly horsed and finely apparelled, presented himself before the castle, where he found his fair lady and a feast already prepared, at which he sat with her. On the other side of the table were her father and mother. In the midst of this joyous occasion, when all was gaiety and they had talked together, in strode a youth clad in sheeny satin. He was of noble bearing and had auburn hair. He saluted Powell and his knights courteously. At once Powell, the lord of Narberth, invited the stranger to come and sit down as the guest beside him. "Not so," replied the youth. "I am a suitor, and I have come to crave a boon of thee." Without guile or suspicion, Powell replied innocently, "Ask what you will. If it's in my power, it shall be yours." But Rhiannon chided Powell and asked, "Oh, why did you give him such an answer?" "But he did give it," cried the auburn-haired youth. Then he turned to the whole company of nobles and appealed to them. "Did he not pledge his word before you all to give me what I asked?" Then, turning to Powell, he said, "The boon I ask is this, to have thy bride, Rhiannon. Further, I want this feast and banquet to celebrate in this place our wedding." At this demand, Powell seemed to have been struck dumb. He did not speak, but Rhiannon did. "Be silent as long as thou wilt," she cried, "but surely no man ever made worse use of his wits than thou hast done. For this man to whom thou gavest thy oath of promise is none other than Gwal, the son of Clyd. He is the suitor from whom I fled to come to you while you sat on the Narberth mound. Now, out of such trouble, how should the maiden promised to 2 men be delivered? Her wit saved her for the nonce. Powell was bound to keep his word, but Rhiannon explained to Gwal that it was not his castle or his hall, so he could not give the banquet. But in a year from that date, if Gwal would come for her, she would be his bride. Then a new bridal feast would be set for the wedding. In the meantime, Rhiannon planned with Powell to get out of the trouble. For this purpose, she gave him a magical bag, which he was to use when the right time should come. Quickly, the 12 months passed, and then Gwal appeared again to claim his bride, and a great feast was spread in his honor. All were having a very good time, when in the midst of their merriment, a beggar appeared in the hall. He was in rags and carried the usual beggar's wallet for food or alms. He asked only that, out of the abundance on the table, his bag might be filled. Gwal agreed and ordered his servants to attend to the matter. But the bag never got full. What they put into it, or how much, made no difference. Dish after dish was emptied by degrees. Most of the food on the beggar's table was in the beggar's bag. "My soul alive, will the bag never get full?" asked Gwal. "No, by heaven, not unless some rich man shall get into it and stamp down his feet and call out enough," the beggar replied. Then Rhiannon, who sat beside Gwal, urged him to attempt the task by putting his 2 feet in the bag to stamp it down. No sooner had Gwal done this than the supposed beggar pushed him down inside the bag. Then, drawing the mouth shut, He tied it tight over Gwal's head. Then the beggar's rags dropped, and there stood forth the handsome leader, Powell. He blew his horn, and in rushed his knights, who overcame and bound the followers of Gwal. Then they proceeded to play a merry game of football using the bag in which Gwal was tied, as men in our day kick a pigskin. One called to his mate or rival, "What's in the bag?" and the others responded, "A badger." So they played the game of badger in the bag, kicking it around the hall. They did not let the prisoner out of the bag until he had promised to pay the pipers, the harpers, and the singers who should come to the wedding of Powell and Rhiannon. He must give up all his claims and register a vow never to take revenge. This oath given and promises made, the bag was opened and the agreements solemnly confirmed in the presence of all. Then Gwal and every one of his men, knights and servants, were let go, and they went back to their own country. A few evenings later, in the large banqueting hall, Powell and Rhiannon were married. Beside the great feast, presents were given to all present, high and low, and then the happy pair made their wedding journey to Gwal's palace at Narberth, where the lovely bride gave a ring or a gem to every lord and lady in her new realm, and everybody was happy. The end. The Red Bandits of Montgomery. When chimneys were first added to houses in Wales, and the style of house building changed from round to square, many old people found fault with the new fashion of letting the smoke out. They declared they caught colds and sneezed oftener than in the times gone by. The chimneys, they said, cost too much money and were useless extravagances. They got along well enough in the good old days, when the smoke had its own way of getting out. Then it took plenty of time to pass through the doors and windholes, for no one person or thing was in a hurry when they were young. Moreover, when the fireplace was in the middle of the floor, the whole family sat around it and had a sociable time. It was true, as they confessed, when argued with, that the smell of the cooking used to linger too long. The soot also hung in long streamers from the rafters and stuck to the house like old friends. But the greatest and most practical objection of the old folks to the chimneys was that robbers used them to climb down at night and steal people's money when they were asleep. So many householders used to set old scythe blades across the new smoke holes to keep out the thieves, or to slice them up if they persisted. In Montgomery, which is one of the Welsh shires, there was an epidemic of robbery, and the doings of the Red Bandits are famous in history. Now there was a young widow whose husband's life had been ended by the footpads or the road robbers. She was left alone in the world, with a little boy baby in the cradle and only one cow in the byre. She had hard work to pay her rent, but as there were 3 or 4 scythes set in the chimney, and the cow's stable had a good lock on it. She thought she was safe from burglars or common thieves. But the Reds picked out the most expert chimney climber in their gang, and one night he slipped down into the widow's cottage without making any noise or cutting off his nose, toes, or fingers. Then, robbing the widow of her rent money, he picked the lock of the byre and drove off the cow. In the morning, the poor woman found both doors open, but there was no money and no cow. While she was crying over her loss and wringing her hands because of her poverty, she heard a knock at the door. "Come in," said the widow. There entered an old lady with a kindly face. She was very tall and well dressed. Her cloak, her gloves and shoes, and the ruffles under her high-peaked Welsh headdress were all green. The widow thought she looked a little like an animated leek. In her right hand was a long staff, and in her left, under her cloak, she held a little bag that was green also. "Why do you weep?" asked the visitor. And the widow told her tale of woe, the story of the loss of her husband, and how a red robber, in spite of the scythe blades set in the chimney, had come down and taken away both her money and her cow. Now, although she had sold all her butter and cream, she could neither pay her rent nor have any buttermilk with her rye bread and flummery. "Dry your tears and take comfort," said the tall lady in the green peaked hat. "Here is money enough to pay your rent and to buy another cow." With that, she sat down at the round table near the peat fire. Opening her bag, the shining gold coins slid out and formed a little heap on the table. "There, you can have all of this, if you give me all I want." At first the widow's eyes opened wide, and then she glanced at the cradle where her baby was sleeping. Then she wondered, though she said nothing. But the next moment she was laughing at herself and looking around her poor cottage. She tried to guess what there was in it that the old lady could possibly want. "You can have anything I have. Name it," she said cheerfully to her visitor. But only a moment more, and all her fears returned at the thought that the visitor might ask for her boy. The old lady spoke again and said, "I want to help you all I can, but what I came here for is to get the little boy in the cradle." The widow now saw that the old woman was a fairy, and that if her visitor got a hold of her son, she would never see her child again. So she begged piteously for the old lady to take anything and everything except her one child. "No, I want that boy, and if you want the gold, you must let me take him." "Is there anything else I can do for you so I may get the money?" asked the widow. "Well, I'll make it easier for you. There are 2 things I must tell you to cheer you." "What are they?" said the widow eagerly. "One is that by our fairy law I cannot take your boy until 3 days have passed. Then I shall come again, and you shall have the gold, but only on the one condition I have stated." "And the next?" almost gasped the widow. "If you can guess my name, you will doubly win, for then I shall give you the gold, and you can keep your boy." Without waiting for another word, the lady in green scooped up her money, put it back in the bag, and moved off and out the door. The poor woman, at once a widow and a mother, and now stripped of her property, fearing to lose her boy, brooded all night over her troubles, and never slept a wink. In the morning she rose up, left her baby with a neighbour, and went to visit some relatives in the next village, which was several miles distant. She told her story, but her kinsfolk were too poor to help her, so, all disconsolate, she turned her face homeward. On her way back, she had to pass through the woods, where, on one side, was a clearing. In the middle of this open space was a ring of grass. In the ring, a little fairy lady was tripping around and singing to herself. Creeping up silently, the anxious mother heard, to her joy, a rhymed couplet, caught the sound of a name several times repeated. It sounded like "silly duped." Hurrying home and perfectly sure she knew the secret that would save her boy, she cheerily set about her regular work and daily tasks. In fact, she slept soundly that night. The next day, in came the lady in green as before, with her bag of money. Taking her seat at the round table near the fire, she poured out the gold, and then with the jingling coins in the pile, she said, "Now, give up your boy, or guess my name if you want me to help you." The young widow, feeling sure she had the old fairy in a trap, thought she would have some fun first. "How many guesses am I allowed?" she asked. "All you want, and as many as you please," answered the green lady, smiling. The widow rattled off a string of names, English, Welsh, and biblical, but every time the fairy shook her head, her eyes began to gleam, as she felt certain of getting the boy. She even moved her chair around to the side nearest the cradle. "One more guess," cried the widow. "Can it be silly duped?" At this sound, the fairy turned red with rage. At the same moment the door opened wide, and a blast of wind made the hearth fire flare up. Leaving the gold behind her, the old woman flew up the chimney and disappeared over the housetops. The widow scooped up the gold, bought 2 cows, furnished her cottage with new chairs and fresh flowers, and put the rest of the coins away under one of the flagstones at the hearth. When her boy grew up, she gave him a good education, and he became one of the fearless judges who, with the aid of Baron Owen, rooted out their lair, the red bandits that had robbed his mother. Since that day, there has been little crime in Wales, the best governed part of the kingdom. The end. The story has ended, but your dreams are just beginning. Let them carry you gently through stars and silence and soft wonder. Thank you for letting me read to you. I'll be here again whenever you need a quiet voice and a gentle tale. Sleep well, sleep deep, and good night, dear dreamer. Breuddwydion melys, dear dreamer, sweet dreams.